Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Whenever you discover this incredible dialogue with the panel of the new untouchables, we are recording this on Friday, August 22nd, 2025. And we are joined by, to my left, the most Donald Trump's most feared and hated journalist that he's never sued before, the one and only David K. Johnson. To my immediate right is the Rubina Chair of Law, Science, and Technology at the University of Minnesota, and so much more. To my lower left on my screen is Paul Peltier, the former Department of Justice high-level prosecutor of white-collar crime and in private practice, and also adjunct professor at George. I was about to say
George Washington.
George Washington, pardon me, George Washington. I was about to say Georgetown. My apologies. George Washington University. And of course, to my lower right, William K. Black, of course, criminologist,
Skip it
economist,
this week.
attorney, and just all around incredible good person that is helping us understand everything that we're looking at. Now, obviously, things are coming at us fast and furious, considering the FBI just raided John Bolton's house in the effort of this mammoth, I guess, retribution that's underway. But I do have to have a caveat, considering all of the horrible things happening in the world and in our country. It turns out that Yankee fans, I'm sure to your chagrin, Paul, stayed up all night to get a George Costanza bobblehead. So that's a particularly important sidebar. But on that
Well,
note,
what's more important, obviously, is that the Red Sox won. Uh, so
On that note, and because he's short of time, I want to start with just some orientation, David K. Because obviously I could tee you up, but I think your mind is already in a lot of important places. Why don't you talk us through your priorities of where we are?
Well, what you're seeing is Donald Trump confident that he has largely consolidated his dictatorship. He, after all, controls the Justice Department through the utterly corrupt Pam Bondi. He has made it clear to the Internal Revenue Service that they are to take care of his friends and that they've been stripped of the capacity to do the work that really matters for people who aren't on our almost totally automated withholding system for taxes. And in other parts of the government, they have removed people who are not getting on board with the pro-crime, pro-pollution, pro-cancer and other diseases Trump administration. The most troubling aspect right now is this militarization of policing, sending National Guard troops, and Trump has said maybe active duty troops into Washington, D.C., over an alleged crime problem when crime is at the lowest level in 3 decades. If you look at crime back to the 1920s, we're a far less violent society, far less criminal society, at least on a blue collar level, than we were back then. And what they're doing is intimidating people. And that's the point. The point here is, don't you dare challenge or question us. We will punish you. So the raid on the home of John Bolton, who, whether you like his view of world affairs or not, everyone understands is a serious, serious student of geodiplomacy. It's not designed to get a criminal charge against him. It's designed to break him, to force him to hire lawyers and spend a lot of money and time and grievance. And they're just getting started on that. They're going to use, I'm sure, IRS audits to go after enemies of the Trump dictatorship. And it's important that people not be cowed. Everybody's not going to have the courage to stand up. But to those people who don't have that amount of courage, then stand behind. Stand behind literally, stand behind by making donations, but stand behind by talking to other people. But stand up for your democracy. More than 1 million people died for this country. So, I'm too busy, or I don't want to get involved in politics. That's a shameful response to these things. And they're going to move faster and faster in this effort to make sure that the dictator is bowed down to. As Trump said, I want people to come to attention for me like they do for dictator Kim in North Korea, who, executes people who fall asleep in his meetings or otherwise embarrass him. The second thing that's happening right now is that the early harvest from the fruits of Trumponomics are starting to come in, and they are very bitter indeed. First of all, you can go on the internet and you can see all sorts of photos and video of crops, lemons, squash, bell peppers, just rotting in the field because there's no people to pick them. Now, lots of them are getting picked, but there's a significant decline. The wholesale price of vegetables in July rose almost 40%. We haven't had a period in the past where they rose 10% or more in a single month. And food prices are going to get higher because so many people who do the work at dairy farms, at picking vegetables, at trimming fruit trees, they're being nabbed off the streets or they're afraid to go to work. And the economy depends on these folks. And so instead of doing what Reagan did, coming up with a thoughtful way to address this, it's just the minister of hate, Stephen Miller. That's his job. He is the United States minister of hate, is doing everything he can to get people who don't look like him out of the country. We know that they have removed from the country, you can't say deported, at least 70 American citizens. They have harassed American citizens who are at the border trying to re-enter the country. The Supreme Court says they have to let you into the country, but it doesn't mean they can't put you through a body cavity search and humiliate you and hold you for hours. I was hoping this weekend that my daughter-in-law, who lives in Canada, who's a Canadian citizen, would be coming to visit. It's not very far. We're about 150 miles from Ontario, west of Toronto. She won't come because at least 150 Canadians have been detained at the border. And instead of saying, we're not admitting you and telling you to turn your car around, or if you're on foot on one of the bridges, turn around, they're arresting these people and holding them in horrible conditions, flying them to Louisiana. Why? To intimidate them. All of this about intimidation. Well, the economic effects of that are terrible. Canadians are not coming here to visit. Relatives of mine who work in the casino industry in Vegas tell me that business appears to be off, at least the tip side of the business, by more than half. That lots and lots of hotel rooms are empty because people from other countries are not coming. Now, some places are doing well. Apparently, Disneyland's doing great at the moment. Disney World, in Florida. But tourism is down. The stock market is beginning to wobble. Job creation essentially ended 3 months ago. And this is what happened in the first Trump administration. Donald Trump actually underperformed on creation of jobs compared to Barack Obama once the Great Recession ended at the beginning of 2010. Obama did about 3% a month more jobs added. And it's going to get worse on the economic front. The federal workers who've been on paid leave, that's running out. Apparently about 300,000 people. Voluntary quits, that's where you quit your job because you know you can get a better one, you already have it. Those are in decline. And so things are going to get much worse. And when the Medicare cuts, the Medicaid cuts start, which will force Medicare cuts, don't be surprised if your health insurance goes up more than double what you're currently paying. It will certainly go up by significant double digits. Your hospital may close if you live in a rural area that has just one hospital. Hospices will close. Elder care places are going to close. And that's all part of the scheme. It doesn't matter that the country will be impoverished as long as Trump and his friends get richer. And Donald will be able to continue his gross and brazen violation of the Emoluments Clause. I was the first person to prove he was not a billionaire back in 1990, April of 1990, from his own documents that I got a hold of. He's never been a billionaire until now. He is unquestionably today a multi-billionaire because he's running an extortion racket. And he will continue to run that. There's a document that's come out showing that one of the arguments for having tariffs on imported goods was it would mean that Trump and his friends could make business deals with people to get out of the tariffs. It's an extortion racket. Chances that Trump will be indicted, 0 and none, because he has his own attorney general, his personal lawyer running the show. And that leads me to the last point, which is at the end of the day, we can get rid of Trump. People have to register to vote, and then they have to actually cast ballots. There were 3.3 million fewer votes in 24 than 20. There should have been about 6 million more votes if voting stayed at the same level. All sorts of obstacles have been put in the way of people voting. Well, I'm sorry, it's going to be hard. 1 million people died for this country. You can sacrifice some of your time and your effort. If people don't get out and vote, it's over. It's as simple as that. If people change the majority in the House, and especially if they can do it in the Senate, which is within reach, Trump will be stopped. But if not, he'll continue to go along, and we will see how he reflects the gentle way we treat white-collar criminals. We just had New York's Intermediate Appellate Court throw out the damages claim of $500 million in New York with basically 5 different scattershot opinions from the judges. But the underlying issue is we spend far too much effort on the kind of blue-collar crime Trump is claiming he will stop, and far too little on the very damaging white-collar crime that white-collar crime families like the Trumps, Donald's the 3rd generation head of that white-collar organized crime family, they will continue to prosper. The signals from the courts are clear about that. They identify with their own group. You don't see the harsh treatments of people in white-collar crime, by and large, that we see with street crime or blue-collar crime. And I'm sorry, I've got to go. I have a mandatory faculty event at Rochester Institute of Technology where I'm a professor of practice. So,
well, David, thanks for leaving us on that very uplifting note.
Yeah, I'm known for those, Paul. Take care.
All right, thank you.
So I feel like I've been a pen in a a bowling alley, and then David Cage just delivered, obviously the ball right down the middle, and I feel like I've just been, thrown out like a strike. But Bill, I think I want to turn that to you for your comments from the standpoint that we saw 3 major duty intersections with the new untouchables this week, but particularly with Letitia James, of course. And then following Letitia James, it was the threat from Trump to the Federal Reserve, to a Fed board governor, that she would be investigated for mortgage fraud. And that on top, of course, Adam Schiff being in the crosshairs, apparently, of mortgage fraud. But this coming from the kingpin, to stay within the analogy there of mortgage fraud. Bill, your thoughts along those lines?
Yeah, I think the line is that life repeats as farce, and we have reached the farce, but it's an attempt at terror, as David Kay mentioned. So let's start with the criminology part, right? Blue-collar crime was down considerably before Trump. White-collar crime has reached levels in the United States that we have never approached, even during the robber baron era. We now have the President of the United States leading the largest criminal operation in the world. And frankly, if he were better at it, so all the things David Kay has said are correct, but he's also a bumbling fool, right? So any of us put in could have explained to him how to be not a multi-billionaire, but a trillionaire by now. He will stumble his way towards that, right? Yeah, because there are no guardrails. And indeed, this has reached a point that we haven't talked about in criminology until now. We typically talk about elite white-collar criminals and how they hide through seeming legitimacy. Trump has reached the stage where he wants the media to advertise for free for him that everything's for sale, and that there's a positive give us money and we will give you much, much, much more money. That's the positive. But the negative is don't give us money. God forbid, get in our way, and we will use the apparatus of the law to crush you. And that we want that to be brazen, that dual message to be brazen. And we don't want to spend money perpetrating it, right? We want the media to do it for us. So yes, the irony of ironies is threatening to use, in this case, completely bogus mortgage fraud charges in a situation where we had massive mortgage fraud by elites, none of whom not only were imprisoned, none of them were even prosecuted, with the exception of like two Bear Stearns fairly high guys during the entire great financial crisis. So, yes, they're going to come. They're bad at it right now. These are completely bogus mortgage fraud charges. But part of it is it doesn't have to be good. As David Kay was explaining, for most people, what this threatens to do is to bankrupt them. And that's plenty fine for Trump. He's already getting people to surrender in advance in most situations. And now we're going to expand it by saying, no, 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 the stuff about being authoritarian, fascistic, no, no, that's me. Yeah, no, I'm all into that. And you can see that they put people in charge that enjoy it. These are these incredibly defective personality types that are consumed by hatred and love the idea of being able to use what was formerly known as the law with impunity to go after people. So they just revel in it. One of the things that people never understood was the United States didn't just have by far the best ability and track record of prosecuting elite white collar criminals, as bad as that track record has been in a number of situations. There's nothing in the world like it. But that wasn't the biggest thing. If you were within the Justice Department, and again, three of us were, it was the restraint that was the glory in many ways. You really didn't get prosecutors, hardly ever at the federal level, using the white collar criminal laws to try to extort. Right? That's remarkable around the world. It's a glory. Just as all those other things David Kay was explaining behind the scenes that had worked so well at the governmental level in the United States, Trump is willfully, in most cases, but in many cases ignorantly, destroying all those things where the government made things function well, but was in the background and people didn't see it. And now you have a wrecker in charge. Now, a lot of it's intentional, but a lot of it's stupid. He doesn't even understand what he's doing to the economy. So if I use my economics hat, I'll just summarize. David Kay is absolutely right. And of course, he only had a few minutes to explain. We could do many sessions on the ways in which Donald Trump is destroying the economy. But the third is one we mentioned in one of our earliest episodes and explained that tariffs historically in every country, in every era, have been heavily associated with corruption. If you slap tariffs on, or even threaten to slap tariffs on, then business people who want market power go, yeah, baby. And they push you and lobby you towards putting tariffs on their rivals. And they push you in terms of limiting tariffs, tacoing out on things that help them. And this is not just bad for the economy, it is profoundly bad for selection. We are self-selecting for the worst CEOs. At the same time, we're self-selecting for the worst government officials. At the same time, we're self-selecting for the worst prosecutors. And we're on, and just I'll add one other thing, just classic what a terrible government does, the creation of a new, essentially secret police force. I mean, it is part of the plan that these guys go around masked. It's not for operational reasons. It's stupid, in fact, because you don't know whether it's a mugging and tons of Americans have guns. So somebody's eventually going to shoot one of these ICE agents thinking that they're simply thugs attacking somebody, right? They want that anonymity. They want that complete lack of professionalism. As bad as U.S. police are frequently in the militarization and such, you don't in the academies have people consciously training them to be thugs and praising them for being thugs. Nowadays, all of those things are occurring. This is a private police force. It is completely antithetical to every, and again, often disregarded in practice, idea of professionalism and justice and self-restraint. Again, that self-restraint that was in many ways the glory of the United States government, these people want to reverse.
Paul, I started off with that sort of setup with Bill just commenting on how that led to the weaponization of this administration, especially through the racketeering lens of it all. But the nature of Letitia James, right? And yesterday the headline that said that they're going to, I guess it was the appeals court that in a split decision had decided to throw out the $450 million judgment. But yet, of course, he's still guilty of fraud, but that's definitely further down in the fine print, right? But beyond that, there was this sort of declaration that a Fed board governor was in the crosshairs of mortgage fraud, as was, all of a sudden, California Senator Adam Schiff, which, of course, coming from Trump is incredible. But you're seeing all of this stuff play out. Where does your come from? Where's your priority in terms of what you're deconstructing, what you're seeing?
Well, I'm still trying to pick myself up at the floor after David's presentation, first of all. So, first of all, everything David said, we've been saying on this program since the beginning, right? I am hopeful because two of the three areas he focused on are hopeful things. First of all, as it relates to the lawlessness of this enterprise that Trump's the criminal enterprise that Trump's running now. I think we've been talking a lot about how to fix those things and whether we can fix those things. Then there's the second component, which we've been talking about as well, which is the economy. And it really looks like the effects of his mismanagement and stupidity is going to be the impetus to affect the third thing, which is voting, right? And I think David's right. And Bill's right. We don't vote. It's over. It's over. But the reality is the one thing that I think is going to drive people to the polls, to the extent we have polls, is going to be the economy. And that is something that through his stupidity, I think is going to cause people to get up and vote. So I think that's the sort of the hopeful message. On the justice front, which you certainly talked about, and obviously Bill's been talking about, this isn't a new playbook. This was all in Heritage Foundation's Project 2025. But everything we've talked about today has been in writing before, much before he was elected. So none of this is surprising. The only thing is surprising is how much the MAGA base and the Republican Party has fallen in line with this fascistic tendency that he has. So let's look at Adam Schiff for a minute. So Trump was, of course, the fraud conviction against him was upheld. And remember, that was about a lot of what he was doing about lying on lying on business applications, business loan applications, right? And he's been saying all along, that's not a crime, that's not a crime, that's not a crime, because nobody suffered a loss. The reality is you don't need to suffer a loss to commit a fraud, first of all. But second of all, Adam Schiff, he's saying that he lied on his mortgage to get a 3% mortgage. Well, I have a 2.5% mortgage, and I didn't lie on anything. So he's either not a good liar, or this is all a bunch of nonsense, right? He lied to get a 3% mortgage, right? So the reality is, as we all know, he's using the law to, and I think Bill made this quote in one of the earlier episodes. I don't know who you quoted, Bill, but you said, to my enemies, everything, and to my friends, everything, and to my enemies, the law. Well, that's what's happening. That is what's happening here, right? And so everybody says, well, the judges are, the courts will be the check on that. Well, he's found the sweet spot where the courts really can't be a check on it, right? The search warrant of John Bolton's house is sort of emblematic of that, right? For a search warrant, all you need is probable cause, and you can develop probable cause through hearsay testimony of a bunch of people. And it's, since Trump's first term, he's been arguing, and people have been saying that John Bolton took sensitive or secret information to write his book. So those are areas where the court system really can't have an impact, because the standard for issuance of the subpoena is really low enough that you wouldn't expect magistrates to be able to, if they're doing their job, to be able to stop it just because there's a political outcome to it. So I think this is an example of areas where you can have an impact, which is what he's doing to try and scare people, simply by doing searches, starting investigations. And he's found a bunch of people that lack integrity, that are willing to go down this route. I think one of the things that Bill has been saying is that what the Department of Justice stood for, and the FBI for many years, as inept as they may be or may have been, is they always had a foundational principle of integrity, and that showed its way in a lot of things, right? And that integrity is gone now. It is gone because there's no fundamental principle on which bears on integrity, and that goes for ICE and all that other stuff that we've been talking about as well. So I think that I guess what I struggle is how to deal with that component, how to fix that component of what's going on now, and I quite frankly don't know how to do it, because it is a sweet spot that despots and fascistic people can operate it in if they can get those agencies to go along. And it looks like he's been able to do that. So it does scare me. It does scare me, because there is a sweet spot that he can use, that there are no systemic brakes that can be put on that, as far as I see it.
June, that's the first time we've heard Paul express any sort of fear. I mean, this guy's been fearless his entire career, obviously facing down the most criminal, conspiracies on the entire planet. And one thing that he had mentioned that I want to kind of dovetail into this conversation, is the election, right? The polls, and we're seeing right now all of the things that are manifesting from Texas, that we've seen play out because of Gavin Newsom. But of course, what's happening in that corollary is Governor Newsom has been very effective at trolling Trump, which is so elementary in context, or just, schoolyard, shenanigans, right? As opposed to this really involved in diabolical grift of the machine through gerrymandering and all of the other elements, in addition to, well, I'll just leave it at that. I mean, when you pull back, I mean, it's just like they're always 10 steps ahead, thanks to these technocrats that have been there, I don't know, for how long? Decades, right?
Well, and now for the good news. Gerrymandering, hardly new. Look at Wisconsin. Um, Wisconsin is gerrymandered to death. The state legislature. North Carolina, same thing. Um, you had Republican governors come in not yesterday. We're talking about a decade ago, and impose their stamp. And there's some states, Michigan has been taken back. Why? Because you had some, basic citizens who got outraged, puts a proposition on the ballot, got it passed, and were able to take back the state. Wisconsin and North Carolina have been winning at the state level. Wisconsin is dicier, but they have not regained control of the legislature. So the good news, the polls. First of all, the MAGA base has been authoritarian since before Trump. I happen to have the misfortune of having watched any number of Republican primary debates. Who did the audience go for? The people who said about the folks who might be deprived of Obamacare, let them die. Okay? That's the MAGA base. What Trump has done is to consolidate a number of different groups who are the most authoritarian leaning in the country. Yeah. So what's the good news? How have Democrats responded? Democrats think it's about good government. It is dawning on them that it is about power. And you know the story I like to tell. What's the difference between Democrats and Republicans? Well, how many Republicans does it take to change a light bulb? Two, one to tell the other to do it. They're authoritarians and have been for decades. How many Democrats does it take to change a light bulb? Can't be done. One would have to rise above the other to reach the ceiling. When Bill went to Occupy Wall Street, he was invited. He went at his own expense. He showed up. They debated whether or not they were going to allow him to speak. Why? Because he would be an elite, elevated over some random person who showed up at the protest. That's changing. What Gavin Newsom is doing in California is long overdue. Democrats responded to rigging the election with good government, and see where that's gotten us. They are now at least thinking about power, and that's a shift. So the other piece, and I view this as good news in what David said, what will destroy MAGAism? And let me emphasize, we're not going to change anybody's mind in the roughly 1/3 of the country that has swallowed the Kool-Aid, that belongs to a cult, that achieves its primary identity from the identification with Trump, that is MAGA and proud of it. We're not going to change their minds. It is rallying the other people. And so to me, the good news is they do notice what happens to the economy. And I want to flag what else they're going to notice. The first, and again, where's Democratic messaging? Non-existent. There has been a war on rural America, led first and foremost by Mitch McConnell. What did Mitch McConnell do? Well, when Republicans swept in 2010, there's something called the fiscal cliff. Nobody ever talks about it. Democrats sometimes talk about how Obama's stimulus wasn't big enough. What they don't talk about is how that stimulus was cut off entirely by Mitch McConnell in 2010, this prolonged recession. The principal consequence was a wholesale assault on public schools. Public schools are most critical in rural areas. They're the center of many rural areas. We talk about rural hospitals, which will be forced to close by the cuts to Medicaid and Medicare and the refiguring of the federal reimbursement rates. Okay, that's going to cause rural hospitals to close. What do rural hospitals don't know? They don't know that the Republicans have been trying to destroy the post office, that they have been trying to deny funding to rural airports, that they have opposed universal broadband from the get-go, that only Biden got it through, and that they are trying to replace public schools with vouchers. One of the things that happened because of Mitch McConnell is that Public school teachers' salaries are now 29, they were at one point 27 to 29% below comparable jobs elsewhere, with the result the best teachers have left. That assault affects everyday people. And there is a crisis coming. That crisis, once it's tipped off, will expose the massive fraud going on across the country. What is that fraud? Financialization, lending. I mean, again, one of the first things Republicans, not just Trump, but Republicans do, is to kneecap the bureau, the Consumer Protection Bureau. And when you do that, why? Because what you've got, especially in times of economic stress, are unscrupulous lenders. The podcast I did yesterday describes how employers are financializing pay, bringing in third parties who effectively are payday lenders and telling their employees that this is a perk. Hey, work for us. You can have your pay every day instead of, once a month. Only what they don't tell you is you're paying fees and interest on these arrangements. So you're getting paid less and your employer is benefiting from ripping you off. Student loan debt. There is a massive crisis coming in student loan debt, with the Trump administration doing its best to put the screws to people who own student loan debt. Who are the people worst off? The people who were ripped off by for-profit universities like Trump U. So Trump U is out of business. But the Trump administration did its best to bring back the fraudsters who run for-profit universities. Not all of them are fraudulent, but many of them are. What's happening to higher education? Well, Harvard is front and center. We see that fight. But Trump's budget cuts for science are affecting every major university in the country, except maybe Stanford, which has more private money than it knows what to do with. But the untold story is that it's affecting community colleges as well. And they've rejiggered the student loan formula, so the next generation of students are going to find higher education less affordable. And what about mortgage fraud? Real mortgage fraud. What you're seeing is that housing prices are declining in a good part of the country. The places that are worst off are all those red states. Again, climate change happens to be real. Insurers know it's real. They've known it's real for a long time. They've adjusted their rates accordingly. Where are the Democrats screaming your insurance is unaffordable because of climate change? And the people who supposedly represent you are making sure we do nothing about it. Well, the states most affected are Florida and Texas. Louisiana, the rest of the Gulf Coast are already hitting a wall. And the final point, we need to have people. I mean, Trump's gift was making Elon Musk the figurehead for his administration. Stephen Miller, who, for all intents and purposes, is a Nazi. He is certainly a white supremacist, and he's quite willing to kill people. Kill people maybe inadvertently, but massive indifference as opposed to death chambers, but he is indifferent to the plight of the people who are negatively affected by his policies. He is not an attractive person. He needs to be the face of the Trump administration. But the other people who do are tech. And so the other crisis coming is right now the only thing powering the economy and preventing it from going into recession is the massive investment in AI. And we ought to be talking about that because there are two things that are coming. The first is that the energy needs of the new data centers that are being constructed are massive. We may be hitting a wall on that. And it is going to increase the electric costs of everyone in the country. We need to be screaming that from the hilltops. But the other thing is that tech has gone from either self-funding. I mean, Meta, Facebook have massive amounts of money they can use to Google to invest in AI. They're now going from either self-funding or using venture capital funds, which do not create systemic risks for the economy. to borrowing from the kind of people who borrow from banks. So when I mean the kind of people, I mean, private equity, a variety of different kinds of institutional lenders. We know that the economy is teetering on the brink because of the tariffs. If it teeters a bit further, you then have the mortgage problems, the student loan debt, etc., kick in. And if you have this bubble in AI, and again, AI can be brilliantly successful as a technology. That's not the issue. The issue is whether the people borrowing massively to fund the investment get their payoff. If they don't, we now have the kind of thing where the entire economy begins to teeter. And if the entire economy goes south because of tariffs, all these points of vulnerability, student loan debt, um, credit card debt, mortgage debt, and tech debt now threaten systemically what takes place, and with the weakening US dollar, the ability of the US to manage a financial crisis with the idiots that Trump has in charge and no clout with the rest of the world are called into question. There could be a major crisis coming. And that's the point where the public wants to put people in jail.
Well, that's hopeful.
I'm an optimist.
I'm feeling. I mean, see, I was feeling the whole time like is Hurricane Aaron, bearing down on the East Coast, and the
Right.
upside is there's great waves for surfers out there, right? No, it's seriously, this is so ridiculous, Bill, from the standpoint that what June just had commented on by way of like the student loans and all of the other things within this paradox of Trump squirreling out yet again of this $450 million fine, right? Everybody else is on the hook, right? But he isn't. And in the meantime, he's been able to strong arm the tall building law firms. He's been able to strong arm, the universities. He's using all of the weapons, weaponizing lawfare and all of those things that you had commented about before. But June, it ends up with what I think is the proclamation, particularly as it relates to what you have laid out many times before in the Restore program, even though that's a hopeful message. But sitting where I'm sitting, if any Democrat doesn't run on making this absolutely clear that this is the RICO presidency, that there should be accountability for this on the other side, I think is a lost opportunity. And to date, I'm not hearing anybody go near that. Nobody seems like they really truly want to challenge this lawlessness with the law on the other side of this bill. How do we get back there?
Well, both parties have been far too close to the robber barons. They're the principal funders of both parties, and they're the whales that make an enormous difference in funding levels. So this is why in the Restore part of our plan, we've always said it's not enough to say no kings. You got to say no robber barons as well. And so Newsom is a good example of this, right? He's long been very close to prominent Republicans, as he said, married them and such. Um, he has been very accommodating to Silicon Valley's worst characters, but he has shown in his recent trolling that he's also someone that is actually capable of pushing back. And of course, we're having this staggering collapse of the Democratic Party as we speak, right? Donations are off, memberships off, the leadership is held in complete contempt by Democrats. All those Democrats that remain, they also hate the leadership of the Democratic Party. And they're comically ineffective as resistance. I mean, where David was starting out, a million people, Americans have died to preserve this country. These folks, you know, uh, are comically bad. And they're comically bad in large part because they're not willing to say anything fundamental because they too are creatures of the robber barons. That's where they get their money. Where they want to make their appointees, right? When they create their own cabinet, if they become president, they want to fill it mostly with those kinds of folks. And as long as you do that, you're going to have a terrible situation. But let's just glory for a moment in the trolling, right? So, you know, you got to give Newsom props for this because it created the quintessential Fox News response. Like, you're governor, you have a high position. What are you doing this stuff? This is obviously insane. And you're going, yes, that's the That's the point, guys. We are holding up the face and the words and the actions of Trump, and you're telling us they're ludicrous, they're insane. No, adult would do these things, and you don't get it. It's especially the part that you don't get it. And I love the one about why isn't your wife telling you to stop doing this stupid stuff? you know, I think Newsom at least still talks to his wife. I doubt that Trump does in these things. Okay, so we need to take on the robber barons. That is the restore plan. We need folks like Paul as Attorney General, or even better, as we've discussed, the DAG, the Deputy Attorney General, who actually runs the Justice Department. But what we have been saying has also had another component that's true, and it's important to remember this. And it is part of our fight program against this. They're very thin. As Paul has said, you can look at it both ways. It is terribly distressing that they could get anybody in the Justice Department to go along with this. But in many units, that's 12%. And it's going to take them considerable time to hire additional folks, to train additional folks. And it's going to be, we can only get folks who self-select knowing that they'll be viewed as sleaves. And so that's actually harder in this sphere than you might think. So we need to be suing every place there is a legitimate basis for suit. And the states need to be suing. And not in a combined 36, it's not 36, 18 AG. Bring individual suits in different courts. There's no federal programs branch left. The federal programs branch, as I said, June and I were units in. We are the principal thing that defends the constitutionality and statutory authority of government programs and actions. And over 70% of the federal programs branch attorneys have resigned. Over half the leadership has resigned. And that's a month-old figure. So it's probably considerably higher. And that doesn't mean the other 30% are complicit. They're just looking for jobs, type of things in many, many cases. So absolutely hammer them. Make the Trump administration show its ugly face. Make it take the mask off. That it's going to go after every critic. Because that is, with some people, going to hurt them. And again, it's on the margin. And it's the type of thing that can get, to Paul's point and to David Kay's point, voters actually out and voting. We need to expose this face. It is not yet at the point where we need to die for the country. And that's the point. Intervene before you need to die for the country to defend it. And the state AGs can do vastly more than they're doing. And they can recruit. We typically have very thin staffs for state AGs compared to the federal government. It's bizarre how thin the state AGs often are, but that's within their control. In most of these states where there's a Democratic AG, there's also a Democratic majority in the legislature, and most typically a Democratic governor. Staff up. You've got all these great people that have left who are experts in bringing these actions. You should be hiring scores of federal program branch attorneys. You should be hiring scores of what we call them AUSAs, assistant U.S. attorneys. These are the folks in the field in the Justice Department. And many of those AUSAs in the field are superb. This is not a thing where Washington has all the brains type of thing. It had some really excellent people like Paul, but there are many, well, every U.S. Attorney's Office had a significant number of very skilled trial lawyers. And some of them, well, we make jokes about the sovereign district of New York and such. But in truth, they have really good abilities. Hire them. There've got to be folks who are leaving the tall law firms that have capitulated, that would love to be hired, that want nothing to do with their firms. Hire them. Make a massive effort to hire them. Do it quickly, but effectively, and assign them, get them out and actually litigating. The Justice Department just doesn't currently have enough sleazy attorneys to defend, much less to go on the attack against innocent people. And so when you bring meritorious actions against them, it isn't just that, you're also preventing the Justice Department from taking abusive actions designed to oppress. And for the historical folks, yes, I assure you, all of us know there were eras at the FBI when it was completely out of control. It has not always had a tradition of restraint. I mean, it did try to get one of the most famous Americans to commit suicide. That was a real thing. And it did succeed with one black activist in getting him to commit suicide and such. There was an era under Hoover, who was a sociopath at best, in which really evil things happened. That has not been the modern FBI. Right? The modern FBI also is completely not liberal. They are overwhelmingly conservative. But that never meant in the modern that they were a threat to the Republic until now.
Well, it was an incredibly powerful, framing, as well. And the thing that's standing out to me, and I hope everybody heard that, is it's not the point where you have to die just yet. We still have tools, especially in the legal arsenal, with the, maneuverings that Bill is, decrying for all of us to listen to. So let's spread this message far and wide. But I want to turn this finally to you, Paul, because I couldn't get this out of my head for the past several weeks, quite frankly, particularly as we're about, and I can't believe we're at the end of this dialogue. And I know your reaction probably is going to be like, yeah, thanks for throwing this at me with like just a couple of minutes left because I got to go to a meeting. But the long and the short of it is that we haven't even brought up Epstein today. And we know that the Trump administration is going to start, indicting, of course, all the high level Democrats and everything that parlays, not to mention, suggesting, like he has with everybody else, that the lie, deny, switch the blame, implicate scenario where everybody like Obama did the falsification of business records and so on and so forth. But here's the big thing for me, Paul, and all of this stuff's been coming down the pike recently, right? And you mentioned this about a month and a half ago when you first started talking about the big hedge fund that was a big Ponzi scheme involved with Epstein, and nobody knew where the billion went. That turns out, I think it's more than $1.5 billion. But what's happened in the last couple of weeks that has been revealed has been extraordinary, right? That not only was Epstein tied to, for example, the Bear Stearns scenario by way of the bailout because he had a liquid capital fund. But all of these things seem to converge with the lack of the suspicious activity reports that you were, of course, quoted and involved with as an expert when the ICIJ did its work several years ago. And all of this stuff seems to be coming to a head where recently a lot of people started asking, well, wait a second, from Putin and all of the other sorts of oligarchs around the world and whatever these billion-dollar capital flows were flowing through the likes of the nature of liquid into the stuff that we saw with Bear Stearns, with Kayafi and Tannen and yada, yada, yada. Look, it's just so obvious to me that there's still so much more to this story that implicates, probably convicts, and connects, I would imagine, Putin, Trump, Deutsche Bank, Epstein, and that's the financial side of all the stuff that they're hiding and switching the blame. Can you just, from your perspective, just give me something that it's tangible that I can go, wow, thanks, Paul.
Well, as it relates to the financial investigation of Epstein, that's just not going to happen during this administration. It really isn't. There's no, I don't see any stomach for it or any desire from these people to do it. The beauty, in my opinion, the beauty about Epstein, it will be the gift that will keep on giving. When I say that, what I mean is it's an albatross that's around Trump's neck that he's not going to be able to get rid of, because you cannot divorce yourself from the fact that his name is in the Epstein files thousands and thousands and thousands of times. And so as long as that continues to get out there, that I think the Democrats will be able to play in a way that's helpful, at least to the end result, which is to show just who Trump is and how corrupt he is. And that's it. I don't think from a legal perspective, anything that's going to happen. And by the way, the statute on most of this stuff has passed, right? Sex trafficking, of course, has no statute of limitations. That can go on forever. I don't think you're going to convict anyone with sex trafficking more than they already have. So I'd like to go back to your point, which you said earlier, is that these people, I think these people, Trump in particular, needs to be held accountable. Of course he does. But I think that I don't think that's what the electorate wants right now. I really think they're sick of that, right? And by the way, if you haven't noticed, Democrats aren't good at holding people accountable, right? Great financial crisis, zero. Trump's disruption of democracy on January 6th, zero, right? So the Democrats don't, and I think the electorate doesn't, I think they see that as lawfare, as long as it might be. I don't think, I think maybe there's a time for a Truth and Reconciliation Commission if the Democrats do get the presidential election in 2028. But I think what the Democrats are doing and what I think they need to focus on is the near term, which is the elections in November, right? And that's going to be a lot about the economy we discussed, but about corruption, not holding Trump accountable for necessarily anything, because you're not going to be able to hold Trump accountable until the next election. And again, as it relates to a presidential election, I think people are sick of it, right? They don't want putting ex-presidents in jail. They just don't want that. So what do? I think the next election is going to be about getting the Democrats elected, getting Jamie Raskin as head of the Judiciary Committee, and start holding hearings and holding them accountable in that way, right? And I think that that's going to be the next legal angle, that you're going to be able to curb this administration. When Jamie Raskin chairs that committee, he can start dissembling what's really going on, exposing the corruption, exposing what the robber barons are doing, exposing this. And I think American people want that for sure. And once you open the American people's eyes to what's really going on inside this administration in a way that will grab headlines every day if you do it right, I think when you have the economy shitting the bed like it's sure to do and like it's doing already and showing cracks to do right now, and then exposing that level of corruption through hearings, I think that sets us up well for 2028, or the Democrats up well for 2028. And I think that that's where you're going to have we're going to have sort of the momentum to shift the electorate towards the other party, if you will, and get someone elected president. But I don't think a winning message is I'm going to hold Trump accountable in 2028. I don't think that's what it's going to be. But I think that the stars are lining up for all of that.
Well, I appreciate everybody's incredible wisdom, insight, proactive sort of thought process on this whole thing. We're at the end of our time. And, I'm so grateful for everybody's participation. I will just say on a personal level that, it was interesting. I just had a one sentence comment the other day in social media that got more attention than probably anything that I've ever done. That's thick with all sorts of insights that I usually bring out of these dialogues. But I just simply said, I hate what's happening to our country. That just spread like wildfire. Just an open-ended comment. I hate what's happening to our country. So yeah, there's a lot of animosity out there, and hopefully we can steer, through these dialogues, everyone in the right direction. Please, everyone, please like, subscribe, and share. Check out everybody's description in the box below. If you have any questions, please let me know. Please check out thecon.tv. Please check out thenewuntouchables.com and thecleannewdeal.org. And until next time, on behalf of the New Untouchables, I'm Patrick Lovell. Good luck and good day. Take care, guys.
Peace.